Welcome to a community update from the Department of Senior Affairs. I'm your host, Ed Nunez, and today's title of the show is Facts Everyone Should Know About Dementia. And once again, it's our pleasure to have Cindy Brown, social worker, certified dementia practitioner, home instead senior care. And Cindy, thanks again for joining us. I think one of the things about dementia is I don't know that it particularly, it's not a topic that people like to talk about. It's a real topic. I don't know that anybody hasn't been affected. You have a member of the family. I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe you can tell us that. But who hasn't been affected by somebody that you know, a family member having dementia and Alzheimer's? You're going to explain the difference between those two in a minute. But it's it's sad. It's because I know a couple of people in our department that are showing some signs of that, and we don't see them around as much anymore. And they call it the long goodbye. I think is that right? And you can talk about that as well. But so many sad things to see a loved one have to go through certain changes in mental health. And anyway, I'm sorry, didn't mean to steal your thunder. What is dementia?
You didn't steal my thunder.
Yeah.
You didn't steal it at all. What dementia is basically, at the most basic level, is it's brain cell death. So it's brain damage at the cellular level. So when you think about it, it's your brain is dying a cell at a time. And the most common form of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. So it's kind of like if you think of an umbrella and what kind of forms of dementia are under the umbrella. It's like when somebody says they have cancer, your first question is what kind of cancer? Bone cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer. Well, when someone says my grandmother was diagnosed with dementia, I'm always tempted to wonder what kind of dementia. Alzheimer's disease is a form of dementia. It's the most common form of dementia, and it was discovered in 1916 by a psychiatrist in Germany when his first patient was brought in her early 50s. And upon her death, he discovered the plaques and tangles that are consistent with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. So when we use Alzheimer's disease and dementia interchangeably, and they're really not necessarily. We know of over 100 dementing diseases. And unfortunately, at least in the United States, if you make it to age 85, you have a 50-50 chance of developing dementia of some form.
That's very interesting. I think a couple of questions that I want to ask you. That the early diagnosis in 1916, you said that was now, Cindy, the way mental health was treated in years past, lobotomies, things like that. I just have to ask, because how was that treated in those days? Because there's several ways that they treat it, or I don't know what they do. There's medicines and medications that some people are on, I guess. But back then, what was the steps in dealing with it then?
Back then, it was treated as a mental illness. It was considered a type of mania, a type of insanity, and so dementia patients were treated with mentally ill patients. So you would have someone who was schizophrenic, clinically insane, dealing with someone who was absolutely not insane in any way, shape, fashion, or form, but they were treated with the mentally ill. Until the 20th century, it was listed in the DSM-4 as a mental illness. And so it's just been in the last couple of decades that it's been recognized that dementia is not a mental illness. It is a medical diagnosis. It's not a mental illness in any shape, fashion, or form.
And one of the other things you said, 85%, if you turn 85, you have a 50-50 chance of developing that. Explain that, because that's, they say there's a lot of different things that people say, they always say exercise your body and heart, exercise the mind, they say, keep that mind strong. But you're saying at 85, now this is important information here, that you have a 50-50 chance regardless.
Absolutely.
Can you expand upon that?
Because we don't know where dementia really comes from. We don't know what all the causes are. We know that there is probably some environmental impact. We know there is some hereditary link to certain forms of dementia. But we know that if you live long enough, if your brain and your body live long enough, that it will begin to develop dementia by the age of 85. The challenge is that your brain begins to have age-related cognitive changes starting in the early 30s. Because our bodies and our brains were really meant to live right about 50 years. In the time before there was adequate sanitation, adequate nutrition, and penicillin, Frankly, the average lifespan for most adults, even in the United States, was in their 50s because we just didn't have the sanitation and we didn't have the nutrition. So your organs, your hips, your bones, your joints, everything has an optimal lifespan of about 50 years. So as your body begins to change, your brain also changes. It's like any other organ in your body. It begins to slow down. It begins to have changes around 30. So when you make it to 85, your body is really living on borrowed time. So the older you get, the higher your risk of developing a dementia. People say to me, how can I avoid getting demented? And typically I'll giggle and say, die young. That's really your only option.
Yeah, and again, to that point, they're also, the last thing we want to do is scare anybody, and these are just facts we're putting out here. We have a lady tomorrow at North Valley turning 99, and still active, still,
attack.
yes. So, there's the 50% too that don't get it. So, we don't want to just harp on the 50% that might get it. There's also people that have lived 106, 101, 98, 95. I have a 90-year-old guy at the center. We did a Veterans Day celebration, and he's still driving, and he's still another 92-year-old man, still driving, so, there are other stories. And
it's important to know that dementia is not a normal part of aging. It's not something that is inevitable, and it is not something that is considered a normal part of aging. Unfortunately, it is fact that the longer you live, the higher the risk. But you're right about the lifestyle issues. That's the one thing that we know that we have some control over brain protection. There's a couple of things. How you eat, how you exercise, how you protect your head. We know that head trauma is becoming more and more understood, that concussion causes serious brain damage that has lifelong repercussions. The other thing is brain protective activities. We do the crosswords, we do the word searches, we do the Sudoku. A study recently came out that said the number one brain protective activity is reading. Whether it's the cereal box, the newspaper, or a novel. Any kind of reading is very brain protective.
Again, research still going on. They found out so many things over the years about how the human brain works, and they're still finding things out. It's an amazing machine, the human body. There's no question about it. And I think a lot of people are going to ask you questions like that because, when you said the brain changes even at 30, and I got to tell you this, my memory is sharp as a tack usually, but I saw that and again, I'm not telling you that I think I'm developing that. It's just there were certain names that I couldn't recall from maybe 30 years ago, but those are names that I could really recall quick, about 5 years, no problem, zoop, boom. And so maybe that's somewhat true, although like I said, my mother, to that point about reading at 88, her mind is still, she reads so much. And, again, that there's no foolproof thing to say, well, if you read 98 pages, there's nothing to that. It just
no magic
research,
equation.
Right? No magic equation. Just really interesting things, though, because that's the scariest thing is about dementia and people that are living in a normal life, and all of a sudden one day.
And people fear the loss of control.
Oh yeah, we talked about control in that last show.
That's right.
Financial control. This is a different kind of control.
People would far rather have physical ailments and lose physical control of their bodies than lose control of their mind.
Boy, that's Coach Summit that developed that. And it's an important. Pat Summit, Summit, the former women's coach at Tennessee, at 61, and I read that, and I was just flabbergasted. I don't know if you were, but because you deal with it a lot.
Stunned.
I was just like 61, and I think the thing that stunned everybody is that she had a player over, and they were talking, and went to the player stayed with her, and the next day she got up and said, "Well, how's your family?" And they had just talked about it and stopped the player right in her tracks. She knew something wasn't right. So doesn't age dementia? Can you explain about that? Does it matter, or is it?
Typically people will develop it after the age of 65, but early onset dementia can start as early as even in the 40s. And I grew up with Pat Head Summit, going to the Lady Vols games with my dad, sitting on the sidelines, and so watching her come out and be straightforward and be honest about what happened to her and her dementia diagnosis was just devastating in many ways because of the image I have always had of her. But what I have noticed about Pat Headsummit is she has maintained her dignity and her grace through the entire thing. And that is one thing that dementia does not rob a person of, is their dignity and their grace, as long as we kind of help protect that. So it can hit anybody, any age. And, you know, Pat Headsummit was always very physically healthy. She was physically active. She took good care of her body. It just goes to show it can hit anybody, any age, anytime.
That stunned me. That really did. That stunned me because you know, she's 61. She's been an absolutely outstanding player herself. Back back in the day, head coach that has won several national titles and has been an inspiration to a lot of different people. And just like you said, again, I think the other thing that's interesting that you said, concussions. You know, we know soldiers.
Absolutely.
How many do they average on a tour? Maybe 6 or 8 concussions.
Minimum.
Right. So, and you know, when I found that out, I didn't know that, and I think I was stunned to that. The other thing is this, and of course, this is just my opinion. This is just my opinion. I think we're beginning to see the end of American football as we know it. And I hate to say that. I'm the biggest NFL fan in the world.
I know you are.
But you can't have guys. Brett Favre recently saying that he had lost some memory at 44.
Yes.
Jim McMahon, Tony Dorsett, Hall of Famer Tony Dorsett. I think, and I hate to say it, it's a $9 billion a year industry. The NFL is going to trot out the best doctors that they can to say that there's no relation. Again, this is just my opinion, not the department's opinion, just mine. That you know, you can't have people going through that head trauma. These guys are so big and explosive and athletic. What do you think is going to happen when this energy meets?
I think that what will happen is we are lucky that we have the technology and the scientific information that we have now. I think we're going to see a lot better improvement in head protection. I think we'll probably see some changes in how the game itself is played. I don't think football will ever go away.
No.
But when I'm working with a client and I start talking about their history, when I discovered that they were in World War II, if I discover they were in the Navy, I don't ask them if they hit their head really bad on the ship. I ask how many times do you remember hitting your head on the ship? And people are always surprised. They're like, how do you know? And I'm like, well, when you watch the newsreels of the day, you see those guns that swing so fast. And in the heat of battle or the heat of, you know, drills and practices and whatever they call it in the military, so many of the sailors were damaged with concussive head wounds. Even sometimes if they were at sea and there were turbulent seas and they hit their heads on the short ceilings and the short doors, you can almost take it to the bank that these folks are going to have some issues in their older days.
Wow. And again, the things aren't unknown. It's a time of war. You're right. In World War II,
Nobody had any idea.
How many times are they getting fired on? I'm reading a book now about Franklin Roosevelt at wartime, and oh man, yeah. My dad's a World War II vet. Never said a word to me about the war, and I understand why now. I didn't understand when I was younger. I never even asked. But my dad was a gunner, took some shrapnel, got a Purple Heart. There's a lot of things my father saw that he never wanted to see again. So I'm certainly that's why he never said anything to me about it.
And he didn't want you to have to know that.
No, and
pain.
And you know what? I respect him and all the veterans for their service to this country. You know, it means a lot. It sure does. But they went through more than we even think. You know, we just see the soldiers in the uniform and the gun. We don't know what the heck they will go through on a daily basis.
We didn't know what PTSD was then.
Oh man. Oh, anyway. So that's something to do with dementia causes of later on in life too.
Very much.
Boy, and just thinking about that, it's sad in a way. War happens, and boy, the after effects and the aftermath is some of the things that we don't have to deal with. The families have to deal with that. So even salute them even more for their service. I'll tell you. The other thing is, I think did you explain dementia different? How it's different from Alzheimer's?
Dementia being the main diagnosis, and Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, as we recognize it. And then vascular dementia is considered the second most common form of dementia. That occurs when the brain does not get the oxygenated blood that it needs. So folks who have had strokes, mini strokes, heart attacks, some seizures, anything that stops the brain from getting the oxygen that it needs. And vascular dementia tends to progress a little differently than Alzheimer's disease, but the symptoms remain pretty much the same. Loss of memory, personality, ability to problem solve, make decisions, reason, and typically it robs people of the ability to do familiar tasks on a daily basis. So why it happens is different, but the outcome is frequently very, very common.
And again, research is ongoing every day. I'm sure they're finding out different things about, and again, the long goodbye. I mean, how we talked about that. How it must be just so painful for family members to go through that.
Well, regardless of your politics, one of the wonderful things that President Obama has done for us, he has declared the Brain Initiative. And what he has done is he is dedicating a significantly large sum of money over the next decades to research the brain, how it functions, how it's damaged, how we can heal it. And it is one of the most promising steps that our government has taken to help us with the research that we need to find a cure and a prevention for these forms of dementia. So whether you're Republican, Democrat, or somewhere in between, that is one of the most significant things that has happened in Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia research in a few decades.
Well, it's a disease that knows no bounds.
That's
Republicans get it, Democrats get it, Whigs, Independents, whatever your political affiliation is, it's not going to stop that. So I think that you're right. I mean, political differences aside, whoever has their political affiliation, that's money well spent, because we may not see that in our lifetime. We may not see a cure, but maybe later they'll find out. And
maybe your grandchildren.
Right. You never know.
Dementia knows no bounds. It is as prevalent in every socioeconomic group. It is as prevalent in every country. It hits people of every IQ level. It's people of every occupation, every personality type. There seems to be absolutely no rules that dementia follows or respects. So it's one of those things that we have to do everything that we can to find out what's causing it and how we can cure it.
Well, you brought up an interesting point. We're thinking about American dementia, at least I was. Any statistics worldwide, Americans get it more or less, English people get it,
It's about the same.
Oh, wow. So,
we just have more people.
Yeah.
The first world countries have more people.
China does and has more people than anybody, but is there any more statistics, more or less? It doesn't matter.
I can tell you this. There was a factoid that was released that in Japan, they are selling more adult incontinence products than they're selling child diapers. So the greater your population of seniors, the higher your level of dementia is going to be.
Well, makes sense, right? Makes sense. Okay. The other, again, Cindy, thanks. I know we go off in different tangents, but they're important ones.
We would never have a tangent.
Yeah. Anyway, we talked about dementia and Alzheimer's a little bit, but what causes dementia? Is there any? I think you mentioned some other things, lack of blood in the brain, things like that. Anything else?
We're not entirely sure. We know that we suspect, and we know that there are some environmental issues. When I first started in this business many years ago, there was some concern that drinking out of aluminum cans, eating from aluminum pots and pans, even wearing deodorant would cause dementia, because they were finding that in the autopsy of dementia brains, that particularly in Alzheimer's disease, there was a higher level of aluminum. So people stopped drinking out of Coke cans, stopped eating out of their aluminum cookware, and quit wearing deodorant. And we discovered that what we really had was a bunch of hungry, thirsty, stinky people, because the aluminum is not what's causing dementia. So there was the microwaves and the radio towers. Nobody really knows for sure. We do know that there is some hereditary factor. There have been some specific genes related specifically to Alzheimer's disease that we have isolated. However, we've also isolated this specific gene for blue eyes or right-handedness. So we know there's some hereditary factor. The challenge is that right now the greatest generation, our World War II folks, that survived the Depression and in World War II, it's the first mass generation that has survived long enough for us to really determine what some of that hereditary information really is. So, for instance, my great-grandmother was born in 1897. Her husband was born the same year, but he died in his late 50s from what we think was cirrhosis of the liver. She died at 93, perfectly intact cognitively, sharp as a tack. She had 6 babies. One died in infancy, one died in his early 60s. So of the 4 remaining children that lived into their 80s or beyond, 3 of them are suffering from dementia. 1 is not. There's definitely some hereditary linkage. So what causes it? We don't know for sure. We don't have all the answers. We have very few answers.
That's an interesting fact too, because I think I told you my mother's 88, still intact. Cognitively speaking, my great grandmother died at 94. Cognitively speaking, still strong. So I think my mother, again, I say this about my mom, she never really ate well, didn't sit down and eat with us. And I look at her, she had a heart attack 2 years ago, and she's still here, So, I always tell her that, Mom,
Stubborn genes.
there's a reason why you're still here, and she amazes me. She's such a strong lady, really. I think about no one's like your mother in the world, you know that, and my mom's no exception. But so hereditary, you talked about that. That's interesting.
And she has a lot of work to do to keep you in line.
No, you have no idea.
I suspect.
That's funny though, because even today she'll still know if something's wrong on my face. I'll walk in, what's wrong? I didn't even say a word, but she just knows.
Nobody knows you like your mom.
Man, mother's intuition is just incredible. But I think those are important facts there, Cindy. I mean, I sure enjoyed that story about your great grandmother, 1897 in Tennessee, born in Tennessee.
Absolutely.
Oh wow! So yeah,
Strong
we've
start.
got a little Southern flavor on the show here today.
Just a touch.
Anyway, anything else about causes of dementia and anything else about that? And again, remember, we're being honest here. There's you can't go out and prevent. There's not a medicine we can take to prevent that.
No.
We're not saying that. We're just trying to educate here. So
That's
I think
right.
that's an important thing. Anything else?
One of the things I would like for folks to kind of look for it, because I frequently get asked, am I having a senior moment or am I getting dementia? And there are some things that are kind of basic to look at, some red flags. One of the things that we know happens with our brain is we slow down a little bit, just like our kidneys slow down and our pancreas slows down as we age. Our brain slows down, but we don't lose the ability to learn new things. You still see, a lot of seniors who are really hot on the computers. They're learning new things. They're learning languages. They're learning all sorts of new things. Just because a brain is old doesn't mean that it still can't learn new things.
Interesting.
A person who has dementia, regardless, there is a significant decrease in their ability to learn new things. So if it takes you a while to learn something, but you still pick it up and you still learn how to use it and you still can be proficient, then just because it takes you a little longer doesn't mean anything's wrong. If new learning becomes a problem, how to use a new coffee maker or a new TV remote, or trying to learn email and just can't grasp it, it's not that this person is stupid. It is simply that this person is struggling with dementia and the ability for new learning is greatly diminished. So that's a red flag when somebody can't seem to learn something, not that they're just picking up on it slowly. That's a red flag for something to worry about. The other thing for something to worry about is we used to make a joke on a very basic level that if you were concerned about your memory, if you thought you were losing it, you were probably okay. It's that when you don't know that you're losing it that you need to worry. As people begin to have brain changes, when we can talk about them, we can talk about how we compensate. I use a calendar, I use sticky notes, I use a pill box, I use reminders. When those things continue to work, those are age-related cognitive changes. When they stop working, that's a red flag for dementia.
Until the fact that you're able to recall those things and still do them, then that's
Right.
it's when you can't even remember that you don't. Then
Right.
but you wouldn't know that though. A lot of people that probably have dementia think and there's even that part too where you tell the people that have it probably don't remember that, because there's again a friend of mine's going through this with his mother-in-law. She has moments of extreme clarity and everything's
Absolutely.
fine, and arguing with
Absolutely.
people that of course I don't have that, and she seems as normal as anyone. And then at 2:30 in the morning she comes over and knocks on their house their house door, and it's a scary thing for him. He's a friend, and he was telling me about that, and so I think that's the other thing too, extreme moments of clarity, and sometimes
Those can be so upsetting for family members and for sufferers, because those extreme moments of clarity, they confuse you. You're used to dealing with your mom you're used to her being confused and you're used to her being disoriented, and then all of a sudden she sounds and acts just like mom used to. For a lot of families, that's really disconcerting, because it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? I had a gentleman explain it to me one time, and he said, it's kind of like when you've got a car with a stereo in it. that's got a loose wire somewhere. You hit the right pothole, your radio comes on. You hit the wrong pothole, your radio goes off. And you never know when it's going to happen, and you can't predict.
And it's not going to ever come back the way it was. I think that's the thing that disconcerts people. Is you remember, and mom remembers everything, recalls memories from years ago, seems like mom, and then 20 minutes later, it's back to the same condition. That's got to be that's why they call it the long goodbye.
When you think about the long goodbye, you're looking at a person whom you have known for your entire life, your entire adult life, if it's a spouse, someone for decades, and you've known them in a different way. And now they are beginning to change, but they look the same, they sound the same, they still like their coffee the same way, they still get cranky at for the same reasons, but yet that person is not the person you've always known. It's not the person you married, it's not the person that raised you, but it looks like it, and it sounds like it, and it feels like it. So you are constantly saying, the reason they call it the long goodbye is because you are constantly saying goodbye. As the disease progresses and as people change, you lose them a little bit at a time. And so it's a very long process of loss. And it makes it hard to grieve.
There's no words, honestly. I'm just thinking about that in my mind, and there are no words for that at all. If you have a heart, if you have compassion, if you have empathy and sympathy, there are no words. Some people don't, let's be honest, they don't. But we've got about 3 minutes left, Cindy, and I want to. What are some facts everyone should know about dementia? Is there any facts that we covered that as well? I mean, we covered a lot of things here.
Probably the main fact that everyone should know is if you are concerned about your memory or someone you love's memory, the best thing that you can do is go to your primary care physician and have an extremely good workup, starting with really good blood work. Look at the basic things: thyroid, B vitamins, folic acid. Look at the absolute most basic things, because if dementia indeed is progressing, if it is indeed developing, there's nothing we can do to stop it at this point, but there are so many things that can happen physically that make it worse. Poorly treated pain, thyroid, malnutrition, dehydration, vitamin deficiencies. If you can correct, depression is a huge one. If you can treat and correct some of the issues that are making the dementia worse, it's not going to stop it, it's not going to reverse it, but you can stop making it worse. You can increase someone's independence and quality of life exponentially by taking care of the very basics. So the first thing I tell people to do is go to their primary care physician and get a complete medical and physical workup. It gives them absolutely the best information from where to start.
That's one of the things you mentioned too is malnutrition, dehydration, pain, treating pain. Nobody would think a lot about those things. I don't think that they would see that as and it's not directly related, but it could make things worse. Particularly,
absolutely makes things
depression
worse.
Can just paralyze somebody, paralyze them.
So can pain.
Right.
When you think about it, when you are in great pain, can you make good judgments? Can you concentrate? Do you sleep well? Can you remember the things that you need to remember to get through your daily life? You treat that pain and you see people who appear to function far better because they do. Because they're not dealing with so much overwhelming pain. They're actually dealing with what's really happening in their day-to-day life. So when you treat the pain, you treat the depression, you correct deficiencies, you fix that thyroid, then all of a sudden, those things are no longer making it harder to function, and they're functioning at the top of their game. Even though they're struggling with some dementia, they still are functioning at their absolute top level.
I think you're absolutely right about that. You can't think, you can't do anything when you're in extreme pain like that. You're right. Your vision, everything is clouded by the pain, whatever it is you might be experiencing. 1 minute left. Wrap it all up for us. Again, we're educating. The last thing I want to do is have anybody say, to be scared about this. Is just facts here.
That's right.
all. And I think people need to know some of these things because some of their loved ones might be going through exactly what you're talking about today. Wrap it up for us.
And the things that scare us the most are the things we don't understand. So when we can look things in the face, when we can be honest about things that could be happening, when we know what to look for, it gives us power. And power means control.
Absolutely. Cindy Brown, social worker, certified dementia practitioner, home instead, senior care, that's where you're at. Thanks so much again for joining us. We learned a lot again.
It's my pleasure, Ed.
You bet.
Thank you.
For the Department of Senior Affairs, I'm Ed Nunez.